So first, I would like to give introductions of our panelists. All right, so first, I will be talking about Dr. William Latham of UDC. He's our Chief Student Development and Success Officer at UDC. He oversees the Division of Student Development and Success. The division's mission is to build a supportive and welcoming campus community while fostering emotional growth and personal development of students. Dr. Latham works to engage all students in meaningful co-curricular programs and experiential learning, which aims to promote retention and persistence toward graduation. He is a graduate of Morehouse College. Dr. Latham received his Bachelor's of Arts degree in accounting. He obtained his master's degree in accounting and PhD in urban higher education from Jackson State University.
So thank you, Nia. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to be here and excited to welcome you guys to this webinar on the for career and about the career process. We are excited at UDC on behalf of Mason and the entire cabinet to welcome you to this webinar. We're excited to have the panelists on board to give their wonderful background and content and experiences and expertise to this conversation. So thank you for your time today. Thank you again to the behind the scenes team at UDC, Jay Morrow, Pat Gusman, Jessica Gardner, Grady Wright for their tremendous work on this project as a whole. And again, on behalf of the Division of Student Development and Success, who are responsible for both your enrollment and your student matriculation at UDC outside the classroom, I want to say welcome to UDC, welcome to this opportunity, and I look forward to a robust panel discussion today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Latham, for your opening remarks. So now we are going to go to our information about UDC and our business supporters.
I never dreamed this career was possible. I absolutely love what I do. My name is Steven, and I'm a proud graduate of the University of the District of Columbia. I received my Master's of Public Administration in 18 months, and during that process, I got 2 promotions and graduated debt-free. The professors had real-life experiences. UDC helped me change my dreams from impossible to possible.
Find your possible. Visit udc.edu/possible to learn more.
Hello, Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program participants. It's Logan here from the iconic Ben's Chili Bowl and Ben's Next Door. On behalf of our entire family, we salute you for participating in today's virtual college and career fair hosted by the University of the District of Columbia. As native Washingtonians, our family has been serving the district proudly for over 60 years. Being a Black-owned business has not always been easy. The challenges that the generations before us faced is more than admirable. It's something that taught us you don't leave your future or success up to raw fate. You pull your team, and in our case, your family together, you show up with a positive attitude, you plan accordingly, and you execute faithfully. These are skills that you'll learn and improve on during your time at UDC. To date, 2020 has been truly challenging for so many DC residents, and I want to share our words of encouragement and hope from our family to yours. To those who have lost loved ones and or neighbors from COVID-19, and to those who have demonstrated and reiterated that Black Lives Matter, our family sees you, and please know we are with you. We will progress as a country with these grassroots movements to educate ourselves and each other, to protect one another and all of our loved ones, and to ensure our futures are full of endless opportunities and resources for all of us to thrive successfully. We wish all of you the very best in the second half of 2020, and remember that the Ben's Chili Bowl family salutes you in all your efforts, including getting your degrees and continuing your education at the University of the District of Columbia. Please do check us out online at benschilibowl.com and bensnextdoor.com. And remember, the University of the District of Columbia is your pathway to possible.
All right, so now we will go to our raffle discussion. Okay, we do have raffles that are available. So raffle number 1, what is the name of UDC's provost, aka the chief academic officer? Please send your answers to the virtualcollege@udc.edu email. The first 2 people to respond will get a $25 gift card to Ben's Next Door. So please be sure to send your responses in to virtualcollege@udc.edu. All right, so I will begin introductions about our panelists. Okay, so we have Mr. Seth Chard. Seth Chard, PLALEEDAP, Senior Advisor for Green Infrastructure at DC Water. Seth has been implementing DC Water's Green Infrastructure Program for combined sewer overflow control under the DC Clean Rivers Project since 2013. Prior to joining DC Water, Seth was the environmental planner for the University of Maryland, where his work included master planning and site planning for watershed restoration and storm water management projects. He holds an MBA from the University of Maryland and an MA in Sustainable Land Use Planning and Design from the Conway School. Welcome, Mr. Seth Chard. Next, we have Mr. Marcus Coleman. He's a Senior Associate at HWC Incorporated, supports emergency management and resilience projects that promote individual and community level actions to reduce risks against disasters. He supported FEMA, the DHS Center for Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, outreach and capacity building efforts to increase safety and security for houses of worship. He led the Department of Homeland Security Center for Faith and Opportunity Initiatives, formerly the DHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, Disaster Operations and Disaster Readiness Activities. He's a proud alum of Howard University, American University, where he received his MPA, and is an active member of Harvard University National Preparedness Leadership Initiative. Welcome, Mr. Marcus Coleman.
Thank you very much, Nia. Happy to be here.
Next, we have Ms. Lesley Conroy. She's the Senior Associate at Gustafson Guthrie Nickel, a Seattle and DC-based landscape architecture firm that focuses on design in public space that expresses a site's hidden histories and repairs connections to the urban context. Studied and designed landscapes at a wide range of scales, from small urban courtyards to large campus master plans. She holds a Master of Landscape Architecture from Virginia Tech's Washington Alexandria Architecture Center. Her notable projects are campus landscapes for United States embassies and consulates in Nassau, Bahamas, Chiang Mai, Thailand, Nogales, Mexico, and Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome, Ms. Conroy. Next, we have Mr. Kafra Crooks. He's a digital strategies producer in the communications department at Carnegie Corporation of New York, responsible for digital marketing, analytics and insights, e-newsletter and contactless management, and website maintenance and optimization. Previously worked as the senior manager of content and digital platforms at the National Urban League, a civil rights organization. He earned his Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and Cognitive Neuroscience from the University of Nottingham in the UK. He is a Brooklyn native, attended high school in South Africa, and has worked in South Africa, Europe, and Asia. Welcome, Mr. Kafra Crooks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Tshaka Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham previously served as a scientific program manager of the Aging and Neurodegenerative Diseases Rehabilitation Research Program at the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs within the Veterans Health Administration's Office of Research and Development, VHAORD. He worked as a research scientist at Bristol Myers Squibb Pharmaceuticals, Inc. He served as a subject matter expert for VA's Genomic Medicine Implementation Program and convened the Million Veteran Program Diversity Working Group. He earned his doctoral degree in molecular biology with a focus on virology from Rockefeller University in New York. He completed postdoctoral training in immunology and tumor immunotherapy at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, France, and at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. He earned his BA degree in molecular biology from Princeton University in New Jersey. Welcome, Dr. Cunningham.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have Mr. Nicholas Solomon. He's currently the Regional Youth and Volunteer Program Coordinator of the National Capital Area of the National Park Service. Prior to joining the regional office, Nicholas held a similar role at Rock Creek Park, a unit of the NPS in Washington, D.C. He has served as an AmeriCorps Vista in Michigan, Maryland, and D.C., and worked for AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps at the Atlantic Region Office. Mr. Solomon holds a double BS in Psychology and Women's and Gender Studies from Northern Arizona University and an MED in Higher Education Administration from North Carolina State University. Welcome, Mr. Nicholas Solomon. Okay, all right, everyone. So I'm going to start with some questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So I'm your moderator, Ms. Mia Reddick. I'm currently a professional school counselor in the DMV area. I'm currently working at a Maryland high school. I earned my bachelor's of science degree in psychology at the College of Staten Island in New York, and I currently hold a master's degree in school counseling from Howard University. We shall begin. Okay. So I would like some structure within this panel discussion. A few key points. If you are not speaking, please keep your mic off so that there isn't any feedback and so that everyone can hear the other person that's speaking. And also please try to keep your responses maybe under 2 minutes if possible, under 3 minutes if possible, so that everyone can get a chance to speak if they choose to respond to this question, okay? All right, so first, well, Mr. Cunningham, you're showing up on my screen. So I do have a question for you, a little bit different. When you were young, right, when you were 11 years old, did you imagine yourself becoming a scientist, or was this something that just happened as you got older? And this can be the same question for others if you choose to respond, but we're just starting with Dr. Cunningham. So can you please answer that for me?
Sure, that's a great question. I have to jog the memory cells way back when when I was 11, different time in this country. But no, to answer your question, yes, I did. I actually always wanted to be a scientist. And I was influenced by actually my grandmother. My grandmother was one of those hidden figures. She was an African-American woman back in the 50s that couldn't go get her PhD because of the racial climate of the times, but was working in laboratories at the NIH. So I grew up from as early as 6 and 7 years old, learning about laboratory stuff from my grandma. So from that really turned me on to science. And even as early as 7 and 8 years old, it just became something I wanted to do. So as I got further in my career and learned what the difference between a scientist and a doctor is, right? Even though you get a doctorate, a medical doctor is a much different career than a research scientist like me. I really gravitated towards the sciences because I really like to ask questions. And that's how I used to, be even as a kid. I would, ask questions. I'd design experiments in the backyard. I'd run string all over my house. My mom thought it was crazy, but I really just loved the questions and designing experiments. And that's helped me in my career. So at earliest age, I got early exposed to it and have wanted to do it the whole time.
That's really impressive. And actually, that's really wonderful. It really shows that whatever you put your mind to, you can really, really accomplish. So, Ms. Lesley Conroy, what about you? What was it like for you when you were younger? Did you imagine yourself going into this career, or how did you transition into it?
Thanks. That's a really good question. I would say I didn't know what my field was as a child. I didn't know about landscape architecture until I was introduced to it in college. So I didn't know always that this is what I would end up doing. You know, there are things that I was certainly interested in as a kid that just totally make sense for where I am at my career now. I'm a landscape architect, and you know, I work primarily in the urban realm, but as a kid, I was really into growing things. I was really into design too, though, and so it sort of always felt like those were two separate tracks, but it wasn't until I learned about landscape architecture that I could sort of incorporate communication, design, you know, green technology, planting, and, you know, just like all that passion for those things into one career. I didn't really know it existed.
Wow. So of course, from like both of your responses, you can really see how important early exposure is to career development. You know, as a school counselor, I always believe that college and career planning begins in elementary school, even in kindergarten. There's so many ways to introduce that to really foster growth in terms of, you know, people figuring out what they want to do in life. So that's really amazing, and your testimonies definitely show that. So Mr. Seth Chard, are you here? Am I saying your name correctly? Please correct me if I'm not.
No, you got it. Yeah, it's last name is Chard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you feel the same way as your other two panelists when you were younger, or how did you get into it, into your career?
Sure. So, you know, I think also in retrospect, kind of looking back over time, you know, various interests kind of led me to where I am today. But coming out of undergrad, I had a liberal arts degree undergrad. I really didn't know what direction I wanted to take my career. I guess similar to Lesley, you know, I had some planning and restoration classes in undergrad that kind of sparked that initial interest. And you know, that ultimately led me to kind of going back to getting a master's degree in sustainable land use planning and design. I then went on and worked in landscape architecture for a number of years. I'm also a licensed landscape architect in the state of Maryland. But through that process, through my design experience, I had exposure to some restoration work and I guess a focus on stormwater management. And that really sparked, you know, passion, ultimately led to, you know, the job with the University of Maryland as their environmental planner, where most of my work was not entirely, but mostly focused on watershed restoration and stormwater management. And then that led to the position with DC Water. So really, it's been an evolution. I didn't go back to grad school until I was almost 30 years old. So it took me a little while to get here, but yeah.
That's wonderful. So there seems to be a question in the chat box. Can you please explain, just for anyone that doesn't know that's coming in to our session, what actually is sustainable land use?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically, I mean, very similar to kind of the core principles in the field of landscape architecture. You know, it's basically looking at how we as a society use land, develop land, you know, conserve land, such that, you know, we can preserve ecological function, you know, for future generations. So making sure that, you know, we're not building on the best sites, that we are, you know, preserving and conserving, you know, functioning ecological systems, and then restoring them, you know, where we can. So it's trying to be smart about saving that resource for future generations, and then also recognizing the co-benefits and ecological and often economic function that those landscapes provide.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Crooks, So the same question I'm going to follow up with you on in terms of when you were younger. Did you see yourself going into being a digital strategies producer, or what was the turning point for you? Or maybe what are some things when you were younger probably influenced that decision, right?
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting hearing everyone else as well in terms of what or how exposure led them to their current career destinations. I'd say that I definitely didn't see myself entering into this when I was younger. But on that same level too, my mother was in communications, and back then actually she was a single parent. So I even went to school with her, and I attended some of her classes way back when in communications, which is quite interesting now, seeing how things turned out. Beyond that too, I think even my travels, I spent some of my formative years overseas, whether that be in Mozambique or also South Africa. And I think those experiences made me want to work on being a better communicator and understanding people. Whilst I was in South Africa, I did high school there. I had a psychology teacher, and she was phenomenal. And because of that, she just like inspired this whole like love for psychology inside of me that I then just took on. I actually wanted to pursue it further. Wanted to understand how people think, what motivates them, and how to even inspire, I guess, people to take actions that are in their best interest. And I think beyond that too, again, with exposure, I was also fortunate afterwards to have the opportunity to work for a national civil rights-based organization, where I was able to see how I could actually apply a lot of the things that I learned to affect a positive change. And I think that in the end, all of those things kind of came together, and it became it showed me the way that I essentially wanted to be able to communicate effectively, but also to help people to understand the value in taking certain actions. I think like that all just really was awesome to me. Plus, I really love maths, so I definitely enjoyed the fact that you could optimize all these things, and seeing behind like the scenes that all these different platforms, it's all based and built on science. There's an art to communications, but it's also science too. I think it just like helped me touch all different sides of my brain, and that was really awesome for me.
That's great. I'm definitely hearing some like, similar things where we study abroad, for college students, how they go abroad and they develop, a sense of what they want to do, or maybe they attach those experiences to their career. And then also, I heard a little bit of like maybe some STEM in terms of you being exposed to that. So that's actually really good. Okay, so our next person, I think I need to ask Mr. Nicholas Solomon. I don't think I got to you yet. What about you? So that's like really interesting about what you're doing right now. When you were younger, was there anything that maybe influenced you to become the Regional Youth and Volunteer Program Coordinator for the Park Services, or did you, see yourself doing something else? How did that work out for you, Mr. Solomon?
Yeah, I don't think I even knew that this position existed when I was younger. To be honest, I don't think I even knew it existed probably about, 10-ish years ago. So and I also, I never really saw myself necessarily working for the National Park Service. This was a position that sort of was announced on usajobs.gov for federal employment. I put my name in. I figured they would never hire me because I don't have a background in environmental science at all. And so when they finally called me and I interviewed, I learned a lot more about the job by doing that process, and learned that I actually didn't need any of that background. So when I first started back in undergrad, my first major was actually in elementary education. So I started as like a first grade teacher. Through that process, I sort of changed. I realized that, variety of reasons, I needed to get out of the desert of Arizona. So that's when I sort of stumbled upon, psychology and women's studies as a way of sort of doing good with communities. And it's always been, that's sort of been a link across all of the work that I've done is community organization. And that's largely what I do now is community organization. My job is really opening opportunities for those in communities to serve their local parks in a variety of ways. We in the federal government, because we're the federal government, we determine youth is up to 35. So so it's sort of a misnomer in my title. It's actually anybody from birth to the age of 35 qualifies as youth, and then anybody can volunteer. So I work with any and everybody. But I think you know, to draw on a similar vein, my grandmother, she was a high school teacher, but she also did a lot with her local community. And I think being around that growing up showed me the value and the necessity to be a part of positive change in my community. And that's kind of what's driven me so far. That's what I've always looked for in a career. So managed to find it here.
Wow, no, that's amazing. And then again, it just brings back to that whole idea of like early college and career development. And you might not even notice that it's happening when you're younger until you get older. It's not always a set program that you go to on the weekend at an community organization. Sometimes it's just right in your own family. So that's really nice. So the last person is Mr. Marcus Coleman. I don't think I spoke to you yet. Are you on, Mr. Marcus Coleman?
I am. How are you all?
I'm doing great. So
Good.
same question. Was there anything when you were younger that kind of molded your path to doing what you're doing now, or did you see yourself doing something similar to this?
So I mean, I'll start by saying like you can't be what you don't see, right? So it's like a little bit of not a lot of exposure to the specific job I have now, but growing up, like my mom was very active in the community. She had built summer youth employment programs. It's actually where I got my start. So my first few jobs were in summer youth employment programs similar to this. And so the thing that I was always interested in is how can you help people? And very much interested in, right? Like how can you help the most people like at a bigger scale or a bigger system? And so that's a little bit about how I got introduced to the work in college at Howard University. My internship on the Hill was kind of like the moment where I had a light bulb for government plays a pretty important role, but it's not just government in terms of making the world better for people. And then when I was in grad school, that's where I got introduced to emergency management as a field, which looks at, again, helping them meet the needs of people that are affected by disasters. So we're in a pandemic now, right? And so it was curious to me that you can have the government bring together faith-based organizations, the private sector, a lot of other entities, and a lot of the skill sets that are on this call today and help build toward a better community. So that's a little bit of how I got exposed. But I'll say, admittedly, I didn't know that this job was an option when I was 11. Like, right, like this is something that just being curious, I was able to kind of stumble across and get into later on in life.
That's absolutely wonderful. It seems like we have a very ambitious group here, very determined. So, I'm definitely hearing a lot of that. Your determination and ambition really drove you to where you are right now. And that's really great, a really great skill set. Really quickly, so Miss Lesley Conroy, I have a question for you. Looking at everything that you do, so working on both, coasts of the country must require some immense, organization skills and, just planning a lot. So I have a question in how have you been able to develop your skill set to perform at such a high level in a unique industry? Like just always like planning. How do you do that? How do you balance everything out?
Sure. I think a lot of it is looking at your skill set and sort of pulling from areas that you wouldn't normally expect. I think, there is, I would say at first, like since I didn't have a very linear career path, I sort of saw that as a negative, but the more that I'm in my career, I see it as a positive. For example, I started out in journalism, and, just economically, it wasn't the best move. It sort of, made me question how much I was passionate about that. But what I learned in that was sort of how to, ask questions and be tenacious and find all the information and use that in what I do now. There's a huge research component in what we do. We try to always educate ourselves about the places we're working before we have a single idea. A lot of what we do is trying to figure out the history of a site before we suggest something new to do to it. And that sort of journalism training that you train to always have another question. That kind of helps me. I would also say it's just the other things, like there's been no other job in my life that's taught me how to handle, people and teams better than working at restaurants in high school and college, of just, just knowing how to ask things politely but assertively, knowing when to get flustered about certain things, just knowing, just like equating sort of what like a dinner rush would be to what it is in your career, and just kind of like having that be your baseline, and taking all of those tools and all those skills you learn, like you're learning these things your whole life. It's not, once I became a registered landscape architect, I had to apply these. It's, so I would say sort of, it's been an evolution, and I've been learning more as a professional how all of those really early experiences were really formative in setting up how I can be sort of an organized professional. I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but that's just sort of what it got me thinking about, because it's, we have systems in place. We, in my firm, I am sort of a leader in looking at the different technology we use to make our systems work better. We're about like 7 people in our DC office, and we have 40 plus in Seattle. So looking into technology that can help us work better together. Again, it's always being curious, always doing the extra research, always, not expecting somebody else is going to do it or somebody else is going to figure it out. It's just like sort of, taking control and following your questions and your passions.
Wow, that's absolutely wonderful. You definitely did touch on a lot of the skills that you would need. So thank you so much, because it seems like it's a lot to balance, and but obviously you're doing a wonderful job, and you're definitely probably like a leader in terms of your project. So it's like wonderful. You obviously have the skills to do it, and that's great. It inspires me as I plan out my time.
Yeah, you don't want to be hearing like how I formulate the cells of my spreadsheet or whatever, but it's all of the before work of how you even get to be that organized. I think it's not discounting all of those skills that you're learning along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Conroy. All right, so Dr. Cunningham, I have a question for you. So as we talk about skill sets and introduce, that topic right now into the panel, what are some skills that you use right now in the midst of maybe the pandemic? And how has COVID-19 impacted your work, Dr. Cunningham? And what are some skills that you're using to balance and to, drive your projects and complete, tasks or run your teams?
I would say the number one skill is problem solving, right? So a good sort of skill to have is problem solving for any profession. I mean, in science, we use the scientific method, which is just a systematic way of problem solving. So I kind of applied scientific method to everything in life, even in response to a crisis, right? So what COVID has actually opened up a lot of new opportunities for our company. Unfortunately, we're seeing, my company works on a genetic diagnostic tool that we're trying to bring to market for mental health disorders. So like PTSD and depression, and we're seeing a spike and increase in those regarding this global traumatic event, which is COVID. So that's creating a lot of new challenges for the community of healthcare professionals, but also creates opportunities for companies like ours to try and make better tools to help diagnose and treat folks. So that there's a lot more work that's been added to my plate in the midst of that. And then in addition, just trying to do our part as good corporate citizens and good citizens, we're actually setting up part of our lab as a COVID testing facility. So we're going to be going live on that in the next few weeks to build to the capacity in our area, the DMV. I think we're still under-resourced as far as testing capabilities, and it's taking a long time for tests to get back to people. So, I communicated with the other executives on my team, say, what can we do now to, at least in the short term, help get everybody back to work? So we have that capacity and skill set on our team, so I'm able to contribute there, and I'm glad we're able to do that. So we're going to be starting to offer that to everyone in the DMV starting as early as the end of this month. So those skill sets, the lab skill sets, I use them every day. Critical thinking, problem solving. Um, these are all skills that are just constantly in play, especially as a startup young company. Figuring out what your challenges are and how to navigate them.
Wonderful. I completely agree with you. Using the scientific method on a daily basis, I do as well. So for Mr. Coleman, Marcus Coleman, hello. What soft skills are important for development, especially for your industry?
Absolutely. So I'd say in addition to problem solving, I think one of the skills that continue to be important is actually empathy. And when we talk about empathy, that's basically understanding the lived experience of the people that you're seeking to engage. I actually learned this when I was in college, right after college, when I organized for the Obama for America campaign, where part of our job was to basically talk to people who didn't know who they were going to vote for and having conversations with them about, in that instance, like voting for the candidate that I was supporting at the time. In the emergency management context and in the disaster context, empathy is important as well. So it's not just knowing that people don't have access to food and water, but it's taking that time to understand the unique needs of certain homes. And so, you may have people who have food insecurity issues, or maybe they're taking care of an older parent or a grandmother. And those needs are going to be very different than just maybe a family of two that have a pet, right? And so empathy is definitely a skill that, of course, is applied with problem solving, right? So just understanding the problems that you're seeking to solve. And then, of course, writing and research. I think across the board, regardless of your career path, it's going to be very important to kind of own your skills and continuously building on writing and not being afraid to research beyond the Google search, right? And allowing yourself to look past what's out there. So that's it.
I do agree with you, especially with that research and writing piece. It can become like definitely handy in terms of when you're trying to problem solve and find solutions for other people. And also when you're trying to connect with the community that you're working with, you have to go above and beyond to make sure that you're meeting their needs. And, maybe that might mean surveys or analyzing data from that community. So wonderful response. Okay, so Mr. Crooks, I have a question for you. So, your journey is absolutely amazing. Traveling and having all of those experiences influence where you are today. How has international lived experience shaped your professional growth? How did it push you?
I would say that it gave me a bit of a more open perspective in regards to what's out there. It also showed me, for example, I don't want to say what's possible, but for me, at least personally, what was possible. I was able to experience different cultures, different people, and in experiencing these different cultures and people, I was actually able to learn a lot from a lot of people, and also to constantly challenge the ideas that I had. I think that a lot of that then translated in terms of me wanting to, again, explore more and continuously challenge myself to challenge whatever ideas I have in my head, but two, to always seek out new and stronger truths or knowledge and information. With that too, I would say that I can't have to give much credit due to mother. She very much pushed me to always continuously go outside of my comfort zone. So with that, I didn't come back to the United States immediately. If I saw something, she would say, "Why don't you try something else?" And I think like with this, even just applying it to what I do nowadays too, and I love the answers that everyone is already giving here in regards to the problem solving and critical thinking. I think that with all these different, or just looking at digital marketing in particular, when we are actually analyzing something and seeing what's the most effective way to actually communicate something, I think a lot of this ties into creative solutions. So not always just going with what's actually there, but also at the same time too, understanding that there are many paths to the top of the mountain, and in that just allowing a lot of those things to actually come through, even if it's not conscious, but unconsciously, I'm sure that a lot of these different elements are definitely seeping in.
Absolutely wonderful. So, I can see clearly just how much that experience has influenced you. And I just hope, that there are more organizations or, when, you have youth that come up to you or maybe speak to you, that they're just as inspired and not afraid to go outside of their comfort zone. So that's absolutely amazing. Just speaking about that comfort zone, how important it is to kind of sometimes step out of it to explore the world around you. So thank you. So Mr. Nicholas Selman, I have a question for you. I saw that you served for the AmeriCorps, and I just wanted to kind of get some insight in terms of what skill set does it take to do that kind of job? Because of course, you're dealing with so many different things, maybe different projects, or you have wonderful things that are happening, but also maybe there's some tragic things that might happen that you have to work on, right, to help different populations and really hone in on that to help people. So what are some skill sets that you see within yourself that really made you drive forward to do that type of job?
It's a good question. I think, and not to steal off what Mr. Coleman said, but I think he brought up a really good point of empathy and the value of having empathy in the workplace. My experiences in women's studies taught me a lot about listening and about sitting in the experiences of others and letting them bring their voice to the table, and then working with others to ensure that their voices were being heard. That was a lot of what I did. I think that a lot of my work as an AmeriCorps member, looking back, at the time I felt like I wasn't doing as much because it was trying to create mechanisms for others to be able to lend their voices to the overall whatever it was, whatever the project was, whatever the ultimate end goal was. And so it at the time, like I said, it didn't feel like I was doing much because a lot of what I was doing was bringing groups of people together and then listening to what it is that they had to say, or ensuring that other voices were coming into the fold that might not be as loud. And so I think that flexibility and then also sort of just the self-reflection to, be comfortable with who I was, to know that I didn't need to be the one to necessarily like step in and fix the problem or step in and like do, all the work in that way, or, be the one to get all the credit for having something done like that, which I think I gained from all of my time in psychology. Those skills it humbled me in a way that allowed me to really engage with the communities I worked with, I think a lot better.
Can definitely connect with that. I hear a lot of empowering others and advocacy, but also, knowing when it's time to when it's a communal effort. It's not just about like me. It's a communal effort. We all did it together. I love that mindset. I'm all for it. And I follow that every single day. So thank you so much for saying that. No, I absolutely love that mindset. It's a communal effort. Thank you. So I have some questions for all of you. So feel free to share as much as you would like. For me right now, you can say whatever you would like to say to this question, because I do think that it will inspire others. So the question that I'm going to ask all of you, so I'll start with, I'm going to go in order so I don't get confused. Okay, so I'm going to start with Mr. Chard. Have you had to overcome any setbacks, and how has that influenced you today? And but how did you overcome that setback? Okay, so please.
Sure. Yeah, it's one example was coming out of my first grad school experience. It was a planning degree, although there was a design component, and I wanted to go work for a landscape architecture firm, pursue landscape architecture, but because I didn't have a traditional landscape architecture degree, getting that first job was pretty challenging and discouraging at times. It took me probably roughly 8 months to land the first job. It also wasn't some of the best timing, economic wise, but anyway, so, perseverance, just really never giving up. You know, as hard as it can be, you know, it will get better as long as you keep pushing it forward. And really all it took for me was just to keep that mindset. And once I had the first job, it was enough to build on and, you know, continue that momentum forward.
Wonderful advice. Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that point. Definitely like just pushing forward and never giving up. That never giving up component is so important. So thank you. Mr. Marcus Coleman, well, same question for you. Have you had any setbacks that you had to overcome? How did you overcome it? And how has that molded you today in terms of your career path or just who you are as a person?
Absolutely. So I was one of the graduates of the class of 2008. And what that means is my career path did not start because I didn't have a job. Couldn't find a job. This was a very difficult time. And so immediately, right, I came out of the gate. I thought I did everything right. Went to college, got decent grades, made a lot of great connections, and woke up 4 years after going to school thinking I had a dream. So I think what that really taught me, and I found words for it later in my career, is that when you think about a career, I think a lot of people think about it as like a career ladder. So like you just kind of go step by step by step. And as we talked about on Tuesday, like I learned, and now I have words for it, your career is more like a jungle gym. So just because you start off on a certain path, or maybe you don't start, doesn't mean that that's the end of your story. And I've been inspired by what kind of keeps me grounded is hearing the stories of other people and kind of their journey and realizing that very few people have a linear trajectory. And even if they did kind of follow a straight line, they still had stepbacks. They still had to do things differently. And so that's one of the things that's kind of kept me grounded throughout this whole thing and really has allowed me, how I often have to center myself is just reminding myself sometimes, look, I'm on a jungle gym. I was on the monkey bars last week. We're going to do the slide next week. And maybe my next career journey is going to be something different. So yeah, and what you find often is kind of those core skills as we talked about, writing, research, problem solving, are going to carry well for you wherever you go, as long as you keep a good attitude with it also.
Are you an optimist?
I am the most pessimistic optimist you'd ever meet. So it's important to confront the brutal facts. You got to confront them as they are. If the job you're looking for requires a master's degree, guess what? You need to get a master's degree, right? I think that the pessimistic part isn't about being negative, but it's just more so accepting that we can't ignore what the world view of the world is at any given time, but you can learn more about it. And this, I think, where empathy is important, to understand enough to kind of find your pivot point. But you can't give up on yourself, and you can't give up on your dream and idea. And you may end up finding, even if you can't articulate it, that you find someone that's doing exactly what you want to do, but it may not be called exactly what you think it's called. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Definitely have to, be real about what you're seeing. There's a balance, and I do agree with you, on that part. So Miss Lesley Conroy, same question for you. Have you had any setbacks, any obstacles that you had to overcome, and how did you do that? And how has it molded you today?
Yeah, I would say when I was in grad school, I mean, I failed a class that was really essential for me continuing forward. And at the time, it was absolutely crushing. I mean, there are all other circumstances about it, but I think, what I am sort of seeing, 10 years plus later is that, that didn't define who I was as a designer. That didn't define, sort of the rest of my life. I was really focused in on this one negative aspect. I was like, I'm going to have to be in school another year. I felt like I was in grad school forever. I kind of was, but the thing was that, I wanted to give up so many times. I was like, okay, if you work in the, as a landscape architect for 7 years, you can still get licensed. You don't actually need a degree. I was looking into all these sketchy loopholes of how I could still, get to the goal that I wanted. But ultimately, listening to some very smart people, they were like, this is really not a big deal. Just continue, just take the class again, just push forward. I think as designers, we're kind of emotional people that think our projects are a reflection of who we are. And that's not necessarily wrong. But for me, it was just like taking a step back and just saying like, okay, I just have to redo it. It's going to take another year. That's okay, because a year, 10 years from now is really not that big of a deal. So I would say that at the time, it really affected me. It really got me down. I felt like I shouldn't even be in the industry, honestly. I was like, well, I guess this isn't for me. But it was just like, once I stepped back and told myself not to let it define me, I continued and I did great work, and I have a job that I really like now. So, I don't want to minimize it by say just like keep moving forward, sort of acknowledge it, acknowledge how much it's affecting you, but just know that, any setback doesn't have to define the rest of your career or even who you are as a person.
Really, really like that phrase of not letting certain things define, not thinking that has to define your whole career or who you are as a person. That's really wonderful to look at it in that way, because I do feel like, a lot of ambitious people or determined people, they might kind of internalize certain setbacks and be like, this is a reflection of me and what's going on. But no, I mean, there's always a way to improve and to get back up there and to sit back up and keep going. You don't have to let that one moment define you forever. It's going to pass.
Exactly.
Like, that's wonderful advice. Mr. Coffer Crooks, same question for you. Have you ever experienced any setbacks or obstacles, or just anything that, gave you a lot of concern and worry? And how did you overcome that? And how did it mold you today?
I think I was also in the same boat as my fellow panelists who were exiting school around '08. So the uncertainty of entering a job market where there were no jobs and people were not actively hiring people, that was definitely, it was tough. And also too, in terms of like the time that it took to actually find a job, a lot of times you could definitely get discouraged. You can feel, I like what Ms. Conroy said in terms of things potentially even, or taking it on yourself and feeling like these things might actually define you. But I agree with her as well in terms of the point that she made that they don't, and you shouldn't actually take any of this onto yourself. That again, this is actually more a definition of the moment, not of you personally. I really like that. And also to the point that you made, Ms. Reddick, too, that this is more so a reflection of what's now, and it's not a reflection of what is. I think like those understandings also kind of like cultivated within me, and it allowed me to kind of just like take it for what it was. I was like, okay, I understand this is what it is right now. But that said, even understanding what it was right then, I realized I'm still not going to stand still. So I still did things, even if I wasn't being paid to do them, I still actively sought out different projects that I could do to grow my skills in one area. If I enjoyed something, I'd do it. I'd actually make a project out of it. And I was just exploring everything. Even if it didn't necessarily lead to getting paid at the end of the day or lead to a particular job, I was just like, I'm going to explore everything. I'm just going to continue to grow because this too shall pass. There will be another day, and I'd rather be prepared for an opportunity when it comes than unprepared for the opportunity that does. So I just say that definitely everyone said to keep resilient and keep moving forward.
Wow, this is amazing. So just a little self-disclosure. I remember, I guess, certain things happening in the nation in the news. I mean, I graduated high school in 2010. So I'm trying to think back as far, but, everyone having that same comment, wow, like the way that you all, became resilient and confident within yourselves and kept moving forward. That's amazing to think about. And during a time where there was a lot going on, especially for new graduates out of college. So that's great. And you all are inspiring me. Like, that's wonderful. In terms of your resilience and where you are now, it shows that it will pass and to keep going. And the fact that Mr. Crooks, you definitely mentioned something that was really important. That even though there might be a standstill at that moment, still find things that would benefit you in terms of like your career. Even if you're not getting paid, you can still add it to your resume, so That's really great that you did that and you kept yourself busy because it all work paid off. Like you're here now. That's great. Wow. So Mr. Oh, sorry. Oh, wait, Dr. Cunningham. Did I ask you this question already? I don't think
No, but I'm happy to answer it. I got a little bit of time to think about it. You know, it's interesting. I've actually had a pretty good run of it. If I look back over my life and career, I've been very blessed. But when I look back, my challenges have mostly been of the financial nature. And I can remember even at the very beginning of my academic career, I was from a single parent home in DC, and you know, got into a lot of colleges. I went to, you know, a nice private school on scholarship, got into a lot of colleges, but unlike my white colleagues and other colleagues, couldn't afford to pay for it, right? So I remember having that first challenge was, how am I going to pay for college when my mom doesn't have any money and we don't have enough money? How, you know, I'd gotten, give you a good example, I gotten admitted to the Ivy League schools, and particularly Princeton, where I wanted to go, but I couldn't afford it. So that was my first challenge. So I had to go get a scholarship, which I did. So that was sort of challenging though, because I remember feeling desperate, like, wow, how am I going to get to college? I can't even afford to go anywhere right now. We're just poor. So how do you overcome that first hurdle? But overcoming that hurdle helped me throughout my career because it let me know that I could overcome a big hurdle and figure out a way. And then it sort of prepared me for my biggest challenge, I think, which was this past year. 2019 is actually the toughest year I've had in a while. I had actually a pretty good run of things as far as having a very stable government job, and was doing quite well, and decided to leave that to do a startup, which sounds a little crazy to most people, but when I was really passionate, I am very passionate about what we're doing and want to make a difference, but being a founder of color to raise money has been very hard. So it took maybe double the time that I would have expected for us to raise our first bit of seed funding, which made last year a real challenge. But we did it. And again, every challenge that you're presented with is just an opportunity to show your resilience. And that's what I would say. And, you know, depending on your background and your family structure, the challenges can be intense. But my message to all of the career seekers out there is that you can meet it. It's all about what you put your mind to. And this is what I tell my kids: the things you can't control. But one thing you can control is how hard you work and your outlook. If you decide to look at something as it's a challenge and I can't overcome it versus it's a challenge and it's gonna do me in and I can't. So these are things that are under your control, even in the midst of things that aren't. So that's what I would really focus and encourage everyone to do.
I love that last point that you made in terms of, you know, thinking about what is in our circle of control, what can we control right now that's, you know, that we can do, but everything else that's out of our control. Isn't necessary to continue to dwell on that. Is it necessary to think about that all the time and stress ourselves out when there's other things that are in our control that can influence where we need to go? So I use that a lot with myself and also the students that I do work with, because, you know, they come in to the office with an array of different things that they're concerned about. And it's just like, well, you probably can't control when the teacher's going to grade your exam. But what you can control right now is what is on your to-do list to do next to get, you know, your homework done for this evening, right? Because all the anxiety can be heavy for someone, and that's really great. I do like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just add, it's like you can't control someone's implicit bias against you. If you're an African-American founder out there trying to raise money, and even when you have an excellent concept and you have intellectual property and you've dotted all your I's and crossed your T's, they still, I don't really know if I want to support you. That's someone's implicit bias. That you can't control. But what you can't control is how excellent your presentation is and how hard you're going to work to keep doing it until you win. And I think there's a certain level of tenacity that all the students and job seekers out there are going to need to have, because when people tell you no, that just means there's someone out there, you know, that you haven't met yet that's going to tell you yes. So that's how you got to keep going at it.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham. Love that point. I really do. All right. So Mr. Solomon, same question for you. So there's a lot of panelists, so I'm trying to make sure I didn't like repeat questions. So in terms of you, what obstacles did you experience and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So I had a sort of unique situation where in my first term as an AmeriCorps Vista, the organization I was working with, about halfway through my term, I was living and working out in Detroit, and the project dropped through. So I found myself in a position where I basically no longer had a job. And it unfortunately just so happened that it was a university that I was working with. So they were also providing me housing and a meal plan. So over the course of a real quick conversation with who was then my supervisor, I found out that I no longer had work, I no longer had a place to live, and I no longer had food. And then unfortunately, when it rains, it pours. And then my car broke down like a day later as I was trying to move out of my place. And so I had nothing. And it was, I mean, yeah, I think it's probably the lowest I've been. But it was one of those moments where I kind of sat in it for a minute and, you know, had my like, woe is me. And then just stopped, like just decided like, that's it. Now we're going to get up and we're going to move forward. So not to be a super nerd about this, but I quote that really hit home with me was from one of the Batman movies. There's the nerd part, where it's at the beginning and Bruce Wayne falls down the well and Alfred helps get him up, and Alfred says, "Mr. Wayne, why do we fall down?" And he says, "To learn to pick ourselves back up," and that stuck with me a lot. And so I think that every time I kind of falter is you know, because there were things that happened outside of my control, right? The project fell through, that had nothing to do with me. Everything else was tied to that had nothing to do with me. I could have kind of just given up and you know, went back to Arizona, but I wanted to do this and I wanted to see it through. So I pushed through. I worked with people at AmeriCorps to find another project. It was me doing a lot of interviews while I was also crashing on a friend's couch and trying to buy a car. So I think the combo of all those things, and I mean, you know, I don't want to belittle at all the privilege and you know, the luck that I had in that time. I had a very supportive family who helped me, you know, pay my bills at the time. I had a lot of friends who were right there with me, who, you know, opened their door and let me crash on their couch when I no longer had a place to sleep. But you know, I think just getting past like that immediate like, oh, okay, this happened to me and now I got to make something of it, really showed me that, you know, I keep reflecting back on that. Like if I can get through that moment, then you know, I can get through any kind of hurdle or any kind of setback. And just like Dr. Cunningham was saying, like it was this moment where I just need to acknowledge like, all right, I can't control this and I need to get up and I need to go and I need to do what I can do.
Wow, no, wonderful story. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of like, you know, young folks that can probably resonate with that in terms of like high school students or even college students that might fall into certain situations like that. And they really do need that extra motivation and push to move forward and to find resources or to contact people to probably help them. You know, a situation like that can probably make somebody feel really lonely, you know, but you found a way and you pushed yourself, and that's wonderful. And it shows in your resilience. Also, you're not a nerd. I resonate with the Blue Lanterns, so, so it's okay. All right. So my next question for you. So it's 2:03. So for all of you, um, in your own way, right? Because I do want to like kind of discuss entrepreneurship or whatever. Do any of you define yourselves as an entrepreneur? Well, Dr. Cunningham, I know that question is going to probably resonate with you a little bit, but in terms of anyone in your like in your career specifically, do any of you define yourselves as an entrepreneur, or do you see yourself going towards that, and how would you do that if you did decide to? So, Mr. Seth Chard.
Yeah, so you know, I've worked in the public sector going on probably 15 years now. So not strictly an entrepreneur, but I think there's certainly a number of kind of entrepreneurial skill sets that, you know, kind of accumulated along the way. And have applied in my work. For example, the job that I have, well, it's several now, but the work that I've been doing at DC Water, basically launching their green infrastructure program for the Clean Rivers Project. I began that work back in 2013, and I was one of two people basically building out that program. And in many ways, building the program was similar to building a startup, albeit we didn't have the funding kinds of pressures or considerations, but we did have to build out, a full team of engineers and designers and specialists. We had to build a whole outreach program, specific design details and processes and specifications. So building that program had many entrepreneurial elements to it. And so I think that those kinds of skills are applicable, on a variety of scales. Of maybe just a single project that you're tackling, where entrepreneurial skills are, important and applicable and valuable, or it may be, a whole company or, so yes, in ways I would say, I do have some entrepreneurial aspects to my job. Thanks.
Wow. No, that's actually kind of interesting because, some people might define being an entrepreneur in a certain way. There are entrepreneurial skills that do go into, every career in some way, in some form. I actually want to change. So I've been hearing a lot about everyone's journey to where and to how you got here. Is there ever a point in your life, now that you're much older, you graduated college a long time ago, do you ever feel that feeling of like you're still growing and that there's something else that you still want to do before, you go towards retirement or anything? Is there anything that you still would like to do that might seem kind of like far away or distant? So for example, I'm a professional school counselor, but there's always that thing in the back of my mind that I would like to be a photographer. I take pictures a lot. I have a portfolio, right? But, of course, sometimes I feel like, well, no, I'm in the field of education. Is there anything that makes you feel that way, or career in the back of your mind that you would have liked to have explored, at some point?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to add my thoughts on that. As I've gotten older and gotten much more involved in a lot of charitable causes, one of the things I would like to do before I leave this earth is become a philanthropist, like a big philanthropist, someone that could write a big check to UDC one day, right? Or a school like that. And so that's a sort of a stretch goal of mine. I think it's helped govern some of my thinking in sense of where career was going. If I stayed in my nice, comfortable government job, I might be able to write a few checks to a few things, but I definitely wasn't going to be a philanthropist, the way that I think of it, someone that could write a $10 million check and be okay with it. So that's sort of, a dream and a stretch goal. I don't know if I'll make it there, but it's a goal because there are a lot of charitable causes that I want to support. And I'd like to be able to have my own resources to support them. And that's something that I think is a good thing, and something that I'd like to do. But it seems far off. And I'm sort of mid-career. I might have another 25 years to work before I'm pretty much too old to do it in my mind. So within those 25 years, I'd love to have enough business success that will allow me to be a philanthropist.
That's absolutely wonderful, and I hope to see you do it. Okay, because there's a lot of students that do need scholarships, and for school counselors, that's like a bulk of where some of the stress might come from, and we're always trying to find ways to get scholarships for students. And I mean, if somebody like you out there that can do that, that would be wonderful. So I really hope to see it come into fruition, and I hope it happens for you. I do, Dr. Cunningham. So, Mr. Marcus Coleman, what about you? Is there anything else that you feel like you would want to do um, before you get older in terms of maybe a career change or adding something to your career or exploring something that you might have always wanted to do?
Absolutely. I think so. When I was right before I went to college, one of my mentors, who actually went to Howard University as well in the dentistry school, basically told me and my mom that I'm going to have 5 or 6 careers anyway. Technically, I'm on career number 3. So my mindset has always been that we're going to have career shifts, and it's just more about picking up the skills along the way that you can kind of take from pivot to pivot. And so it kind of tying it back to your question about entrepreneurship, using the definition of a person who organizes and operates a business, taking on greater than normal financial risk to do so. I think I'm always looking for what are different ways that I can take different type of risks that align with my values and my beliefs. And so I love the philanthropist point. It's something that I've been very interested in as well. And so to do that, one of the steps that I'm taking is surrounding myself with business leaders and with people that are involved in philanthropy. So when we talk about financial risk for people, I think we also need to think about time as a financial investment. And so if you're getting paid a certain amount of hours to do a job, and then you're not doing, and then you end up doing stuff for free, just allocate that hour that you're doing stuff for free to that time. And that kind of gives you a sense of, well, am I spending $1,000 learning nothing? Or am I spending $1,000 learning, for your example, Nia, right? Like how to get my photography business off the ground. So in terms of like what I would do in addition to the philanthropy piece, so I'm very interested again in storytelling. And so I've been interested in what are the different ways that storytelling and problem solving can help more business leaders and help more people that are looking to do good while doing well as a business leader, help meet the needs of disaster survivors for the long term. So not just providing food boxes, but completely overhauling and changing the food system, working from the local grocer to farmers markets to some of the investors that may be looking to get involved in the community.
Wow, that's really amazing. You all are just so great. Like I love this selection of panelists a lot. Um, so Miss Lesley Conroy, what about you? Is there anything else that you're hoping to do or something that you would, maybe hope to add on for yourself?
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay? I had to switch because my phone died. Okay. So I would say for what I do, there's different types of licensures you can obtain. I mean, for me, straight out of school, it was, getting the experience and studying to become a licensed landscape architect. And, that had sort of been a goal for a while. And then I did it. And then I was like, well, what was the next goal for that? So then I wanted to know more about sustainable building design and how that could be incorporated into the landscape. So I took the lead, the sustainable building credential test and earned that. And as I've just been working more in my career, I've become really interested in learning about what other professions do. I love talking to engineers about, what their process is. So I've, I've bought engineering books so that I can, have a more informed conversation with them. I've become really interested in the work of arborists and, the care of trees in an urban environment. So right now I'm studying for and will take my arborist exam at the end of this year. So it's all the things that sort of, I don't really know I was into any of these things, but, as I got some of those earlier goals out of the way, I started thinking beyond what exactly is my exact profession and started thinking about, what are my interests and how can that make me better at what I do? I was going to say your question about, do I consider myself an entrepreneur? I guess my only answer is just not yet, maybe.
Well, I mean, I do think that it's wonderful that you were able to take all of your interests and relate them to what you're doing now. And that's really amazing. I think that takes a lot of skills to do because, of course, like we're humans, right? We're not going to just have one blueprint for the rest of our life. But it's really cool when you're able to combine your interests and make it work for you. So that's really nice. Mr. Crooks. what about you? Is there anything else that you would like to do, or add on to your current profession?
I think that I'll probably be working for the rest of my life, more so because I find I gain inspiration from everything. So whether it's music, whether it's television, whether it's looking at Jordan Peele's new Twilight Zone series, or even reading a graphic novel as well too, comics, even video games as well. I feel like all these things there's like an underlying lesson that you can actually grab from it. All these things can actually give you something. And personally, what I would aspire to do would be to not just be a consumer of all these things. I also want to contribute, and I'd say that I'd want to try creating on all levels, whether it be like in regards to what I'm doing currently in terms of communications, but even expanding upon that too, looking at even film, looking at doing something radio, looking at doing art, looking at even writing as well too. I think anything that allows you to reach others and to potentially even inspire them as well for some other positive change or even personal growth or whatever it is, whatever they can actually gain from that, that is very much in line and resonates with me. And again, like everyone else too, just answering that question about entrepreneurship, I think that also kind of ties into that too, because I also want to be at the point where not only am I a creator in that sense, but also too, I can create for myself and around myself as well, whether that be work or even opportunities. Even in regards to like looking back at the journey that got me here, at that time, like way back in '08, I would have loved to have been able to be in a position where I can actually create something for myself. And it's actually made me realize that regardless of my path right now, I need to always consistently be building towards a place where I can be self-sustaining. I can actually not necessarily be reliant upon others for certain things. Also, too, looking at the fact that not everyone who's in your career path may necessarily be on your team or as helpful as they could be. So it's always to be able to, if opportunities aren't presenting themselves, you can actually create opportunities for yourself. You can create doors and open doors for yourself. I just want to be in a position where that is always happening. And I feel that so long as I'm learning, I'm growing, and I just love learning. So yes, anything that can actually give me those experiences, I'm going to try at it.
Absolutely wonderful response. I'll definitely be remembering that for myself and also for the students that I work with on a daily basis. Um, Dr. Cunningham, wait, you already responded to this one, I think, right? Okay, so Mr. Sullivan, for you, what would you like to do? Okay, so like, what are some things that you would want to do in addition to your profession, or maybe like Miss Conroy, combining all of your interests? What are some things? What do you want to do before you prepare for retirement?
I mean, to be honest, I got really caught up in the whole FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, and that I think that spawned out of that one moment I had in Detroit where I wanted to make sure that I got to a place where I no longer needed to necessarily rely on that job for a paycheck, but instead I could rely on that job to fulfill a passion of mine. So so I'm still working at that, but I'm not looking to necessarily retire and go live it out on a beach or something. I think I want to get back into teaching. I would love to, be able to choose to be a teacher instead of have to be a teacher so that I can pay the bills. I also, my brother just returned from the Peace Corps, and I had the opportunity to go out and spend some time with him out in Ethiopia. And, I would love a chance to do that too. So kind of probably a mix of both, I think would be where I would love to fall.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. That's great. And yes, please come back to education. I think that a lot of the students would relate to you and really enjoy your presence within the classroom, more than just teaching. I mean, they might just love the conversations with you in terms of your experiences, and that might inspire a lot of young people. So we hope to have you back in education soon. Mr. Seth Chard, yes, question for you, because I didn't get to ask you this one. The same question, is there anything that you would like to do before, you know, you prepare for retirement, or just in your life? Like, is there anything that you want to add to your profession, or something that you felt like you wanted to do besides what you're doing now?
You know, I have to say I'm pretty happy with my job now. This is probably can't think of a better job that I've, you know, really ever had. But that said, you know, I fully expect to have one or two more kind of careers out there before retirement, and probably never really truly ever retire. You know, I have a wide variety of interests, some of which are more hobbies than anything else, but you know, I just don't ever really see myself stopping. If the work at DC Water were to dry up and were not to continue, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 other things that I would be very interested in pursuing. So, you know, without getting into specifics, I mean, I think it's just important to kind of cultivate multiple interests and curiosity kind of throughout your life, so that, you know, when you get a curveball, you didn't put all your eggs in one basket, and you know, you can pivot and do and try other things.
No, absolutely, and wonderful, and really wonderful in terms of like what you said in the beginning, that you love what you do. You're happy with what you're doing, and I think that's so important to have, because like when you love what you're doing and you're happy, you're putting 150%, 200% into it, and it's impacting the people around you and also just your own life. So that's really great that you are, and that's beautiful that you're enjoying what you're doing. All right, so to all the panelists, you know, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your experiences and answering all of the questions. I'm pretty sure that it has inspired so many people. And since these will be recorded, these are recorded and they will be on the UDC website, students are able to access it, or just people in general. So they're going to see your responses, and hopefully they're inspired by you. So once again, thank you to each and every one of you. All of you are just so ambitious and determined and resilient. You have that tenacity, and it's just wonderful to hear and see and be in a room of people that feel that way. So we're going to now close, and we're going to start with closing transitions. So we're going to start with the video message from our business supporter. Once again, thank you so much to all of you panelists. Okay. Ms. Gardner. Okay, so next we will pull up our raffle challenge. Okay, so raffle number 2 states, which of these associate degrees is not offered by UDC? Fashion merchandising, mortuary science, or both are offered at UDC? So please send your responses to virtualcollege@udc.edu, and the first person to respond will get a $25 gift card from Lee's Flower or a UDC gift bag. So if you really want that prize, please send your response to that email and you will be notified. Okay. So once again, thank you. Special thanks to our sponsor, Next Door Restaurant and Bar. Okay, Ben's Next Door, you're awesome. Thank you. All right, so once again, thank you to all of our panelists. You all are amazing and keep inspiring. And to everyone else, remember the University of the District of Columbia is a place for all district residents. I have immense respect for UDC. UDC is just amazing. I mean, You all have done a lot for the students that I've worked with and will continue to do a lot for DC residents. So thank you so much for being a place where people can reach their dreams and goals. So once again, thank you to everyone here. I hope to, see you all soon on another panel discussion, hopefully. But once again, thank you to our webmaster, to Miss Jessica Gartner, to Patrick Guzman, to Mr. Grady Wright. Thank you so much. And I hope to see everyone soon and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great job, Nia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.